why don't you just give a quick little introduction to the folks who may not know who you are and they're just tuning in. Just give us a little rundown on your background and yeah, do that. Let's just keep it simple. Do that.
I don't know why it's always so difficult to do this every time. It's just like,
I can read your bio if you want.
you can't, do you know what? Read that then,
I
because
will. I will. Ready? I actually was just reading
yeah.
it. I was actually
Oh my
just
God.
I was just reading it because I posted a video on my Instagram and I was like, hey, Stephanie Cottee is coming back on. So anyway, Dr. Stephanie Cottee is an animal behavior and welfare professional with nearly 2 decades of experience applying scientific principles to real world scenarios. See, you're gonna have to help me with these degrees because I don't know if I'll say them right, but she holds a BSc, so
Bachelor's
bachelor's. What's the
of
C?
Science,
What's the
Bachelor of
C?
Science,
Okay,
Science,
that's what that is. Okay,
SBSC, Bachelor of Science. Yeah.
got it, got it. In animal behavior, along with a MSc and a
Master's
P
of Science.
master's and a P thank you, and a PhD in animal behavior and welfare. Her career has spanned various sectors, including animal agriculture, corporate animal welfare leadership, and nutritional innovation. She has worked exclusively in implementation of best practices to improve the welfare of both farm and companion animals. She now focuses on supporting animal health through nutrition management and evidence-based solutions. In addition, she's a dog trainer and a co-owner of Black Kraken K9, a breeder of working line German Shepherds. And I'll add that you are in Canada,
Yes.
which is lovely. Last time we met, we now I got to find you again. Last time we met in Canada.
Yeah. In
Um,
Toronto.
yeah, it was a good time. And then I think shortly after that, we left for Australia, I believe. Anyway, thanks for coming
Yes.
back on. Appreciate you a lot. Every time that I saw also too that you were on a couple other podcasts talking about some other things. So it's good that we're we're getting the good word out there. And
Sorry, there's chaos in my background too. There's a lot of dog barking and chaos, but
that's fine. That's fine. I just know that the chaos is coming because of the cleaners. But we'll see how my wife does. She does pretty good. She's got the e-collar. She's ready to go. So I appreciate you coming on. And what I really like about what you do and having conversations with you is because everything that I do is to help dogs and to help owners understand what's going on in the world. And because of your academia and your background in all the things that we just talked about, you make it really easy for dog owners to understand how to read through all the stuff, right? Because as you know, in dog training, there's a lot of muddy water. And I really like talking to you and I appreciate you coming on. So what's going on in your life right now? Are you training clients' dogs right now, or are you just working on your breeding programs? What's good in your kitchen?
all of it, all of it. Still training clients, on all sorts of weird and wacky things. There's a ton of like anxiety type things, and we'll get a little bit more into that. Pet people, pet dogs mostly, but um, outside of that as well, my life right now is just consumed with training our police prospect dogs that we bred from our last litter. I've got Jack with me, and if you hear screaming in the background, that'll be him.
Awesome.
This is our first litter of a purpose-bred Malinois cross with GSD. We did that for a particular reason. We wanted just sort of that intensity of the Malinois with a little bit more of that sort of thoughtfulness of the GSD. We paired things very carefully. So far, the litter's almost a year old. They're going to be a year old May 8th, so in a couple of weeks. And they've got their police exam coming up next week. So it is like all hands on deck. It is crunch time, and we are pushing hard on that training. So wish us
So
luck.
the litter that you bred is
Mhm.
almost a year old.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're
How many
11.5 months.
how many
We
many
had
dogs?
nine. We had nine in the litter. and we held back four of what we thought were the best prospects. And so all four are being handled by four different people. They've been raised by myself, my partner Jamie, and we've got two other partners that are police canine handlers. And it's been an incredible journey. It's been wild, Tom. It's been wild.
What what are you finding out about it? I mean, what do you it's something that you haven't done before. Is that right?
I've placed police canines before, but to have them raised like this by ourselves for the entire year and doing the training ourselves, has been really, I mean, it's been a wild ride, right? And it really showcases the differences in how we raise dogs depending on what the goal is. They are not pets, right? So I've got house dogs, I've got pets, retired sport dogs type thing that are
Mm,
enjoying retirement and just loving life. And then we've got these dogs that are being raised completely different. And in fact, the things that we encourage in these dogs are things that would completely discourage and disallow in pet dogs. So the pushiness, the jumping, the barking, the pulling, all the, no, 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 we don't do that with these guys. It's completely different. Yeah, very, very
y-
different for the things that we want them to do. So, I'll give you an example, like as you was just saying with your Dutchie that just loves to work. These guys were purpose bred dogs for their work ability. And I know that that was something that you wanted to talk about actually was lines, right? And
mhm.
what breed for. This is one of those perfect examples of what we were breeding for. Yeah, I'll give you an example, even how we feed in the morning. For almost a year, and I kid you not, none of these dogs have ever eaten from a bowl. So it's not like you wake up in the morning with your pet dog, you got to go to work, put some food, whatever that is, kibble, raw, whatever, in their bowl. They eat and you go, right? Food for us, like breakfast, takes about an hour to get through. And I'll tell you why. Because tracking is one of those things that he's going to be tested on. Very important if you're going to go for dual purpose, tracking and patrol, which means we need to maintain that work ethic. How do you maintain that work ethic? We make them work for their food. So I will drive out somewhere to like a farmer's field. I'm so lucky that I've had permission from amazing partners that have let me use their acreage that's covered in like cornfields and forests and that not. And I'll go walk maybe half a kilometer, three-quarters of a kilometer, and I'll maybe dump a little bit of food every, couple of 100 meters or so. Um, and then I'll go get the dog, and then he has to go use his nose, use his brain, sniff it out, follow the footsteps, smell it out, and he will go find his food and eat it off the ground in the middle of the forest, let's say. And we do that every single day. It's been rain, shine, light snow, because when the snow gets deep, we can't track, right? Because they're going to go from nose to visual, and just look at your footsteps, right? Not challenging. We've done this in sleet, thunderstorms, you name it. So
But
that's how they eat. He earns his breakfast. It's you want to eat, you got to earn it. And we do that every day to make sure that that motivation and work ethic is maintained. It's hard. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of commitment.
Now, do you have personal dogs at home that are also in this schedule that you have, or are they just different?
He's no different. He gets to eat out of a bowl. He's living the life of a good
Cool.
retiree is my old sport dog, right? He gets all the loving and he gets to be a house dog. This guy is in a crate and he comes out to work and to just have some playtime and exercise. But then for the most part, he's not allowed to just sort of meander around in the house. Very, very structured, highly structured. This is how we eat. This is how we track. We do bite work. Every week I go see my decoy. Um, and we work on that. So it's very, very structured. Breakfast, dinner happens at 4, water is removed at a certain time. He's in his crate for a certain amount of hours. He comes out just screaming to work. So
Mm,
it's very different. The pet dog versus the work dog. What is the goal that we're trying to achieve with the dog? It's and so the training is completely different. It just depends on what your goals are and what your rules are. And I think you probably get this a lot, Tom. People say, is it wrong for the dog to be on the couch? Like, I'm sure you hear that, is it bad? And my answer to that is, well, it's only bad if it's a problem for you. Like, it's your house and it's your rules. Do you want them on the couch? Totally cool. Do you want them not on the couch? Also totally cool. The most important thing is if they're on the couch and you want them off, then they need to get off. That's all.
mm, hmm.
Your house, your rules.
Yeah, I tell people we get that question a lot, and I think I don't know if it's an old wise tale. I don't know if I
Mhm.
want to call it that, but it's one of those things that people say throughout my whole life, not even just my professional career, like never let your dogs on the couch. And
Yeah,
I've always like, as I kind of grew up and then getting into dogs professionally, I was always like, well, I don't think there's ever a problem. I mean, my old Saint Bernard used to lay on the couch and it just do funny stuff, but I never had a problem getting him off. So that is an interesting thing when you're raising these when you're raising these puppies, now adult dogs, to go into are they already tested? Are you testing with the buyer currently, or is the buyer like, hey, these are the dogs I want? Like, do you know that they're going to be placed in an academy or in a department for sure, or do they have to be tested still?
they have to be tested and they have to pass whatever testing exams is important to the buyer. So it's tough because it's not a done deal,
Right.
right? It's kind of like, and there's where genetics comes in, that you can do the best with the genetics and with the training, and hopefully you get good genetics and good training, you get a good dog and you get a good fit. But ultimately, um, you really don't know. Um, and it's kind of like saying, you just expect this to happen. It's kind of like, well, I've got a German Shepherd, so he's
Mm.
he's a police dog, and that's not true. It's like saying, well, just because you're tall, you're going to be like really great at basketball, and you should be able to be like a pro basketball player. It's like, no,
Mm.
that's not
Hmm.
the case. Like, these are just crazy assumptions that we have in our
Hmm.
brain. And it's like, that just because you have a Rottweiler or just because you have a Shepherd, then you've got yourself a guard dog. And that's not the case at all.
Right. What's the when you're breeding these dogs for specific work, what are your how do you go through the process of picking the puppies that you think are going to do well? What are you looking for? And during that process of when the puppies are born, how are you testing them to know, okay, these are the four puppies, these are the five puppies that are going to do well with this type of work? How are you classifying that and auditing that?
Um, so to decide which ones we held back, it's kind of like a filter. There's a bunch of things happening. So first of all, well, you're going to have natural variation within each litter. Like, there's natural variation in any group of anything, right? And you're going to get the ones that are super soft, maybe like really, really friendly. You'll see, like, at 8 weeks, you can tell the ones that are super snuggly, maybe a little bit more. You can tell the ones that are more aggressive, I guess, more forward, more independent.
Confident,
Um, yeah, confident, but also independent. For example, who's the first one who's like out of the whelping box? Who's the first one that's like putting their nose into corners and like getting under things? We'll bring them to a certain room where there's tons of stuff, right? Who is the one who's just like snuffling around, and like if you throw food in there, who's going to go find it and have a ton of drive to continuously search and search and search and like sniff it out, look for it, not look back at you for help. Um, not get stressed out and want to get back to mom. And I mean mom, like the actual mother, the dam of the litter, right?
Yep.
Because at this point they're still kept with mom for some time. And who's the one who can venture out a little bit and really have that independence and that curiosity, some stress resilience. So for example, um, I remember Jamie and I had taken some puppies out. This was like, litters ago. We took them out into the forest. We did things like gunshots. And we wanted to see like who's going to recoil, who's going to kind of freak out and run away, who wants to seek comfort, who doesn't need that comfort, who doesn't care, who doesn't react. And most importantly, not even just like, do you see a fear reaction? And it's more, do you see a reaction that they can recover from?
Hmm.
So you really don't want to have like a dog that's like freaked out if you drop a pan right next to their head and they go, "Ooh," and they run away. And then they're like, I've had enough. I don't want to go back to that area. And they kind of go back and kind of snuggle with mom and sort of get that comfort. That's not the type of dog that we want, right? That would make a really good pet for somebody, which a lot of pet owners love. They want the affection, they want that closeness, they want that bond, and they don't necessarily want a dog that's super independent that doesn't pay attention to them. That's not what pet owners seek, right? Like, why would you want a dog that just doesn't
Yep.
pay attention? That's exactly what we want for a work dog, where they're a tool and you need to send them out to do something,
Yeah,
right?
it's like
You,
yeah, it's like me
yeah,
yesterday. I was at Home Depot, and I was looking for I had this at our facility, there's a bar that goes across our glass door so you can push it open, and it kept falling out. And there's this little tiny screw that's in there, and I couldn't find anything that fit. So I went to Home Depot, the store of all the tools, and I started just trying all like a whole rack of tools, and I just started trying all the things, and I was looking for something that fit. I needed the right tool for that bar for it to work. And it's a lot of the same stuff that you're talking about. But what's as pet owners, who majority of people who listen and watch content in general, not just mine, they don't I don't think they understand the distinction between the working line dogs that you're speaking of, and of course the dog that they may be getting for companionship. And of course companionship also goes hand in hand with working. It's not like you trade one or the other. But to get a dog that has all that drive. So you talked about like somebody being tall, which is what I always tell my pet dog owners. Hey, if you get a dog, if mom was anxious and nervous and scared, and dad was anxious, nervous, and scared, and they were born in a shelter, or they were born in the streets, or they were born in a
yeah.
backyard, there's a good chance that all those puppies are going to grow up to be the same way. Not always, but there's a high likelihood that that's going to happen. What would be what would be your take on if somebody asked you, hey, what's the difference between not just a shepherd or a Malinois,
Yeah.
what is the difference between a working dog and a pet dog? In your opinion, how would you address that and explain that?
So for the most part, a working dog has been selected for working traits and for that breed too, right? Like border collies as a work dog, they've got things that are important to their work. German Shepherds, Malinois, they've got things that are selected also for their work. In general, their drive to work is high. Their desire to do things and need mental and physical stimulation is high, but especially the mental part. Um, Whereas pet dogs in my opinion, they're just basically more unselected in terms of um, traits that are important for work. And in fact, there may be some, I would say, let's say, show line dogs that are selected for those particular traits that might make good pets, or just unselected. And I say unselected because when I think about pet dogs, just general pet dogs, there's so many sources where you can get pet dogs from.
Right.
People go to the shelter, some people go to like literally a backyard breeder. It's not uncommon for people to say, "Hey, I got my dog from like a farm that was down,
Mhm.
out in the country, and some farmer said, 'Hey, puppy's here. they're some crossbreed. We don't know. They're $100 each, right? Like, and that happens, right? So those could make good pets. Who knows? I don't know. To me, like the whole pet dog is a bit of a toss-up because they're not necessarily selected for traits.
Mm,
Um, that you know what you're getting. So for example, okay, the dogs that we have now, like this GSD litter that we had, I guarantee that if a pet person took one of our dogs, it would be put into a shelter within days, right?
yeah,
They'd say, "What's wrong with this dog? Oh my God, he's hyperactive. There's something wrong. Should we put him on Prozac? Should we do this? Should we do that?" The whole what's wrong with him? He's, chewing holes through the walls. I can't live with this dog. He paws at me. He bites me, incessantly. He's constantly whining. He can't settle. That would be true if this dog were put into the hands of a pet person who just wants a companion and doesn't realize that this dog's need for mental stimulation is exceedingly high. So if a pet person were to take, let's say Jack, and he's screaming in the morning, and they're like, okay, well, maybe, we'll take him for a walk around the block, on a leash. So you should be good enough. I'm going to give him his breakfast. I'm going to go to work. And then next thing you know, somebody calls him at work saying, hey, your dog's screaming. We're calling, animal control because he's barking incessantly and making so much noise. He's scratching his way through, yeah, I don't know, walls or crates or whatnot, and you think there's something wrong with him. But really, what he needs is to do a 1 kilometer track
mm,
hard, wearing 10-pound weights on a harness, using his nose to figure out where things are, getting an awesome like hit of like, feel good hormones that he got it. And then he goes home after some physical and mental exercise. Then he's good for the next few hours in his crate to sleep. In the next 3 hours, it's going to start up again.
yeah,
And most people can't handle that kind of ridiculous amount of commitment. It's generally not sustainable if you're not going to be on a particular type of structured lifestyle and environment that can do that. It would be literally like the most hellish pet you could possibly have. It's not a good fit for somebody who would not know. If this dog were put into like a shelter and somebody adopted him, he'd be returned probably 5, 6, 7, 8 times and then finally euthanized because they don't understand what line he comes from,
yeah,
right? So the pairing between owner and dog is crucial, crucial. And I think that's where going to a responsible breeder is so important,
yeah.
because you get to talk to them.
Yeah, the compatibility, right? Like when you
Yeah.
so because that's something that a lot of dog owners don't know, and it causes more damage. So being proactive to understand the dog that you're getting, and also being educated to know that if you get a German Shepherd, if you get a Australian Shepherd, you get a Border Collie, there's different variances of these breeds as well that people, and I think the most common one that I see are like field labs and goldens, where people just think that they're getting a lab or they're getting
Yeah.
a golden, and they have that real perked up, drivey prey drive.
Hmm.
Some of my most enjoyable moments as a dog trainer is working with high drive labs. And I remember this one lab, we were doing this free dog training thing in a park, and this girl was raising, it was one of the service dog outfits, either seeing the blind, the seeing eye dogs, or
Right.
something like that. And she's like, man, this dog is, he pulls me all over the place and he jumps and he's just so excited. And I was like, all right. And I took out a tug and he just went crazy. And I was like, this is so cool. It's like this, it's like this Malinois and this, it's like a perfect mix of a dog that like I would want as a family dog, with the personality and the predictability of a Labrador, but the drive of a like a Malinois loves biting and finds it very enjoyable. And so I think that it's something that dog owners don't even consider, that when they're
Hmm.
getting a dog, there's this fork in the road of, well, is this a working dog or is this going to be like more of a companion dog for you? And genetics play such an important role in picking the dog for you. And sometimes you can't, generally speaking, a lot of times you can't, like shelter dogs. Like I've had in my personal life some amazing shelter dogs that I've adopted, and they live the longest, they're the healthiest, and they're the most balanced dogs. You you don't know, I call those unicorn dogs. You don't always get that lucky, but generally speaking, for an example, when I sought out to get Burley, my Boerboel,
Yeah.
South African Mastiff, to me, what was important was getting a stable dog that I knew was going to be the right fit for me. And my experience with his breeder was, even to this day, so enjoyable and professional and really well done. It's Peterbilt Borbals in Texas, and there was a there was a girl that went. Forgive me if anybody's heard this before, but I'll tell it really quick. There was a girl that got abducted about 10 minutes from my house, a young girl. I used to go to this from a campsite, and I used to go to this campsite as a kid, and having at the time just and he's probably one, and I was just every parent and every person in our area was like, we couldn't sleep. It was devastating because this
Yeah.
creep basically snuck on and stole her. They got her back, but anyway, so I said, nope, because we were gonna go lab, right? My wife was like, let's go lab, let's play it safe. We've done it. And so I said, yeah, you're right. So I was like, nope. So that night I said, what's the most protective dog that I've ever worked with in my life? I should rephrase because it's important. We're talking about genetics. What's the most protective, innately protective dog with with a level head, right? So was protective. That's the base of the dog, is being protective. You didn't have to rile them up. You didn't have to teach them. They're just genetic. The disposition of the dog is to be protective and to be confident about it. And their size and their mass usually speaks for itself. So it was I've worked with 3 or 4 Borbals, and I loved every single one of them. And I was like, I don't know how pet owners get this dog. Like I just don't understand it. And the people who do it right,
Yeah.
I have a friend that has one. She's had 2 now in her life. Her name is Heidi, and I met her, and she's introduced me to the breed. Long story short, I called the breeder. I did an inquiry. He texted me the next day and said, "Hey, I saw that you're interested in a Borbal. Can we talk?" And he tried to talk me out of it. I didn't tell him about anything about my career or
Okay.
anything. I just told him that I had experience with large breed dogs, and he just tried to talk me out of it. Like he's like, "Man,
Awesome.
yeah, exactly." And
Yeah.
and it's a really valuable story because I want to talk to you about, because there is a conversation of adopt, don't shop, etc. And I want to get into that a little bit as a because I kind of have this opportunity to really shed light on, I get this, but I also get this on spending money on a purebred dog for this reason. So in my head, I said, okay, I'm going to have at least, we have 2 young kids now. We live in a cul-de-sac full of kids. They're going to have friends. Like, man, so I talked to the breeder and I said, and what he did is he interviewed me and he said, what's your day like? What, what's your house like? How much property do you have? How much fencing do you have? Do you have an HOA? Uh, how many, he interviewed me, and what he did is he said, okay, I got a litter coming up that would fit you good. Because he breeds, that's his job. Well, not his job. He's actually law enforcement, but he breeds dogs. It's his passion. And so he kind of interviewed me and said, okay, I have this pairing that would do well. So it was so cool to hear this guy kind of say, it's kind of like going to a restaurant. You say, when you're ordering wine, and you're like, I like something not too dry, not too sweet, a
Yeah.
red, a balance, something from Spain. And they're like, I got you. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's what it was like, is what is your lifestyle like? What's your future going to be like in the next 10
Yeah.
years? Or do you have another dog? How old is that dog? What is she male? Is she female? What's her personality like? And that was, and I knew I was like, man, this guy's really responsible. And I really enjoyed that about him because anybody that just sells a working dog to somebody because they have money is not, in my opinion, ethical. I'm sure you can agree with me on that, right?
Yeah, we do the exact same thing. And it's funny that you said he tried to like talk you out of it because we do the same thing. Like we actually, Jamie and I do this sort of like, let's try to talk this person out of it test. So we have them actually, anybody who's interested in our puppies, we have them fill out a puppy application form from our website, and that's sort of our first line of filter right there. There's like key things that we're like, no, delete, no, delete. And then there's certain people who are like, I think this is worth a callback. And then there's an interview, and I do the exact same thing. And it's the first question is, why do you want this breed? What are your goals with this dog? What do you hope on achieving with this dog? Where do you live? How do you live? What do you do for a living? How much, same thing, property. How many hours is the dog going to be spending alone? Do you have any other dogs? Do you have any children? But again, it's what is your desire for this particular dog? Why are you coming to me, basically? And if we have somebody saying, well, uh, we've got like four kids, all under the age of 10, and we really want to have a playmate for our Chihuahua, and it'd be great for the kids to have a dog to play with. That's not going to work. That's not going to work
Right.
for us. It just isn't, and we live in a busy part of town in the city, and we're gone, the wife or the husband gone, and they're going to be home, 7, 8 hours, 9 hours a day. But maybe we'll have somebody see if they can come in at lunchtime and let them out. Like, it's just not a good fit because they're looking for a pet, and it's like, what are you going to do to work the dog though? Do you want to join sports? Do you want to join like an IGP or a PSA or ring sport, or are you interested in, search and rescue? Or you like, I need to see something about what you want to do with the dog mentally and physically, and you want to get the dog because you want to work the dog and train the dog as part of a lifestyle,
Mm.
not to do training as something to be gotten over with. Right? Like some people like, okay, I'm going to do some training. Like we'll go to PetSmart for 8 weeks and yeah, we'll get the training. And then training is like not something what they want to do. It's just like an annoying part that they have to get through, right? Like, oh, we'll do the puppy training. We'll do, 6 to 8 weeks. It'll be done, blah, blah. We want our pet. To me, it's like, no, I want people to tell me that I want a dog to train with. I want a dog to go to club with every week. I want a dog to be part of like a training community because I love the training aspect, right? So it's a different community and a different goal oriented type of people who want our types of dogs. Because the last thing I want is for a dog to be returned.
Yeah, you're matchmaking. And
Yeah.
that's with with Burley, my Mastiff, that was it was it it was all part of that. And then even when we went to select, because basically it was like I had pick of the litter of males, and he told me, which was really cool. I picked him up, I think at 8 weeks, but what we flew down to Texas, and what he told me is he said, this one is going to be bigger and less protective, likely. This one will be a little bit smaller and probably more protective and be a different color. And it was so cool because now that they're both developing, it's exactly how they played out. And so he knew my point is he knew his genetics so well. And it's very
Yeah.
impressive to see somebody who can basically breed two dogs and go, these are likely how these puppies are going to turn out because I know that he knew the genetics of dad all the way up and then the mom all the way up and then what the puppies would look like. It's kind of like mix matching colors. You're like, if you mix this
Mhm.
color and this color, you're going to get this likely.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I had not hesitancy, but one of the things that I knew I was going to have to address as somebody who's in the as a public figure, if you will, in the dog space is the adopt, don't shop thing. And what I explained to people is I needed a particular, just like what you just said, I needed a particular dog to do a particular thing, and it can't be I don't want to chance it, right? I don't want to take a
Yeah.
chance. I want to know when I get this dog, I need a protective, stable, family-oriented, loyal dog that doesn't have aggression in the bloodlines with people, doesn't have this, doesn't have that. And so I want you to, because this is what you do. I mean, you breed dogs and you do all the genetic behavioral assessments. I want you to kind of explain to people your thought process on spending good money on a well-bred dog, and what's the difference between that and going somewhere to kind of get a dog that you don't know how is going to be. And I'll just say this before you dive into your opinion really quickly, that if anybody asks me if they just want a dog as a companion to go on runs and hikes with on the weekend, I tell them to go to the shelter.
Mhm.
But if somebody, just because there's so many dogs that are young enough at that age that are sitting there with their tail and they're just whipping it and they're just like, I want to go run, and they're probably going to be great for you. But
Yeah.
for somebody like me, or even somebody like a police officer, or a police academy, or an organization, or somebody who does say, hey, um, I, I want to do ring sports, I want to do protection. Like, in your opinion, what's the big difference between seeking a breeder such as yourself and other good breeders in the world, paying the money, waiting the time to get what you want, versus kind of taking it, and not even just mixed breed dogs, shelter dogs, but finding a Rottweiler that you picked up in Walmart parking lot at 12 in the morning because they were $50. I mean,
Yeah.
what's your take on all that?
Oh man, we're treading into dangerous territory here. It's going to be like truth bomb time,
Yeah,
Tom.
I mean
Uh,
that's what I think that's what people want to hear sometimes.
uh, Look, there's that old saying, you get what you pay for.
Mm,
Okay. There is some truth to that. And I'm not saying that that's 100%. There's nothing that's 100%, but there's a reason why you pay for what you do. You always have to think about why. You have to ask why. And for the most part, if you're going to a responsible, reputable breeder, I'll tell you one thing, and Jamie and I, honestly, we cry over this all the time, is that people think, oh my God, we're paying, X amount of dollars for these dogs. It's expensive. You're all about the money, right? You're just all about the money. These money grubbing, like, greedy breeders, they just want to make money off their dogs. I can tell you for a fact, we don't make any money off of our litters. Why? Do you have any idea how expensive it is? Like, we literally, and I think it's actually on our website. It could be on our website. I don't even remember now, but we had a breakdown of the cost of what it costs for one of our litters that was done through AI, artificial insemination, because we had to import semen from Germany, overseas. So we had to pay somebody to do the collection, right? A vet. We had to pay to actually have it shipped into this, very expensive container that keeps it frozen, ship it overseas. Then I have to pay for, once we receive the shipment, I have to find, a vet clinic that's going to keep it frozen someplace that I can store it, right? We got to pay for all the progesterone tests for our female when she comes into heat. This isn't like when you're doing AI, it's very expensive. And we're doing progesterone tests basically every 48 hours. It's extremely involved. Testing, and testing. Everyone costs, money. Then you have to go to a special repro veterinary clinic to do the procedure. Very, very expensive. Um, there's genetic testing that I do. Actually, I'll swab them and I'll send off that swab to a lab where I can get some information about, well, do this way before this, obviously. This is when we're figuring out who we're going to pair, right? It's like, oh, does the father carry something
Mm.
called DM? Does the mother carry something called DM, which is degenerative myelopathy? Obviously, there's that's something that shouldn't even happen today. Now that we have commercially available genetic kits that we can test for that, let's say, I don't know, 75 years ago, 50 years ago, if it wasn't possible, then it's a roll of the dice, right? Your dog turns 10 years old and their back legs go out and they get crippled and there's nothing you can do about it. There wasn't any test. There are now, so we need to spend the money to go do that, right? There's the OFA hip or pen hip, like you got to do your x-rays and you screen that. Like if you add up how much money we put in just to make the breeding happen, it is unreal. Like the thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars that we put into just to get her pregnant, and then there's like, then you don't even know if she's even going to get pregnant. And that happened to us our last year.
Mm.
We did exactly that. She didn't get pregnant.
Well, so you go all that work,
We were
testing.
gutted. Yeah. We
Yeah.
did everything possible and it didn't take. It just didn't take, right? She just didn't get pregnant. We had a list of people who were interested. They were all ready because the pairing was perfect for people who wanted to do sport. um, or protection type sports would have been awesome. So we lost all that. We lost an entire year, right? Like it was just, people don't think about what we go through as breeders to make a really good litter happen.
Right.
And then when they're born, it's like, my God, all hands on deck. It's like you said, taking care of babies, right? For
Yeah.
weeks and weeks on end. And then the nutrition and the feeding and then the vaccinations, like it's expensive. This isn't backyard breeding where you're putting nothing into it to get it maximum out. Like we're putting everything in it because we love these dogs and we want to see the breed strong and we want to see the breed be a representative of what the original creator meant them to be, a strong, all-purpose, all-round, confident, reliable working dog. And you can't do that without funds.
Right.
So when we pass that cost on, that is a reflection of just how much we put into it. And the dogs are registered. Like that's not free. I got to go through CKC and like do all the registration for each of the puppies. Like it is a huge amount of time, money, and effort, blood, sweat, and tears that goes into it. And any responsible breeder will tell you exactly the same.
Yeah. And it's the stress of breeding a female that you love and care about. And that
Yeah.
there's always a risk there. I had a buddy
Yeah.
who just put money down for a really well-bred DDR German Shepherd program, and she's been breeding for like 30 something years. And I texted him. I said, "Hey man, are the puppies born yet?" He said they all died and mom died. And
Oh,
that's that was the first time in like 30 years that she's ever had a, a, a female die with birth.
yeah.
And so there's that too. It's something you care about, and it's like you never know what's going to happen. So there's always a risk of that. And you got the whelping box, and you got the lights, and you got the heating pads, and
Yeah.
you got all the equipment and the time that you spend in doing all of the, I don't know if you guys do this, but the neurological stimulation, and
Yeah.
you're testing the puppies, you're bringing them out to the woods,
Yeah.
you're building and developing and bringing out their temperaments, and doing early testing and training. And so when so there is a difference between a dog that is well bred and a dog that isn't well bred, but they can be the same breed.
Yeah. A shepherd isn't a shepherd isn't a shepherd. Just like you said, a lab isn't a lab isn't a lab. And people think that it's one thing,
Yeah.
right? Oh, I got a this, so they should obviously do that. And it's
What do
like, not really.
what doesn't cross your barrier of genetics when you're breeding? If you see what are red flags to you when you go, we're not breeding this dog because of these reasons? Like, are there any red flags to you that you say I'm glad we
No,
have this dog, but we're not gonna make any puppies from this animal.
absolutely. Well, so for us, and this is just us,
Hmm.
and this is because of what we breed for and what our goals are, which are good, strong, protection dogs, good for, high level sport or police canine, that type of thing. We will not ever breed a dog that shows nerviness, for example. Nerviness, no confidence, fearfulness, that's huge. No, that's just completely unacceptable. That to me is like, that's the number one red flag.
Yeah.
Nerviness, fearfulness, that type of thing. It needs to be like a dog that's going to be highly confident, courageous, independent, can take on the world, no fear of anything, right? Like, you need me to go run into the fire, ma'am? Yes, ma'am. That's that kind of like strength that we're looking for, and definitely things like stress resilience. So if anything happens, can you bounce back from it? Right? Are you ready to go again and say, oh, okay, I'm good. I'm good. I'm good now. Back to good. We can't have a dog that like goes down and then stays down. That just isn't going to be good functionally going forward. So for us at least, that's really important. Now
And
I
what
can't speak for other breeds. I don't know what they're looking for, but for us that's important.
what about like physical attributes? Like, do you or is there anything that you see with muscle development, bone development, uh, uh, heart, like organs? Like, is there anything that you see? Because you can't guarantee things, but you can make pretty damn sure the last 20 years of this lineage hasn't produced any hip dysplasia or anything like that. Are those things that you're also looking for and you're testing for when you're doing these genetic tests early on?
So interestingly, I'd say from a work perspective, you can get a pretty good assessment of the health of the dog by how well they function. So if you have a dog, let's say one of our studs, is 12 years old, uh, and put in good 9 years as a dual purpose police canine, never had any problems, right? Um, and he checks out with hips, for example, and elbows and whatnot, and just sort of all those basic tests. That's a good assessment because if your dog can make it to like 12 or 13 and put in like almost 10 years of functional work, that
Yeah.
to me, that says a lot, right? Like, it's the actual dog in front of you is actually more important than even what paperwork would say. That to me is really important. What's the actual dog in front of you? How healthy have they been, right? So if you look at that mother and you look at that father and you look at all of their parents and grandparents going back and you see how old they made it to, like, obviously, to me, a red flag would be like, oh, somewhere back there, like, all these dogs are dying really early.
Yep.
Like, they're not making it past 8 or 9. There's a problem there, right? That's going to be a red flag. So I think it's really important to look at the actual dog in front of you. Are they athletic? Can they, um, run long distances without gassing?
Yep.
Um, can they handle all sorts of different weather conditions and whatnot? Like, that to me is really important. Look at the actual dog in front of you. How are they physically and how are they faring? And can they do the work that you're looking for? So I look at all sorts of breeds now, and they make me really sad when I'm looking at some of the extreme morphologies of, like, brachycephalic dogs that they're so pug-faced. They have a hard
Yeah.
time breathing. They can't jump into a car by themselves. You got to carry them. Going for an extra long walk in the heat, you're afraid they're going to die, like literally,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
All the things. It in back to your point of like you get what you pay for. One of my employees has, and if you're listening, she knows that she knows about this. She has gone the route of getting kind of cheaper dogs, like purebred dogs, but on the cheaper scale. And particularly like her Doberman, she's dealing with cancer, she's dealing with kidney failures and other issues with the dog. And to your point, like when you're a breeder or you're breeding, if you see anything in your lineage and one of your puppies comes back, hey, just so you know, or two of the puppies, hey, just so you know, we
Yeah.
we developed bone cancer or something, you're probably going to halt the brakes on studying that dog out or whelping that dog and making sure that you don't pass. So that's the thing that I think dog
Yeah.
owners need to understand is when you're buying a dog from a reputable breeder and you are paying for not only all the checks and the things that you've done, but you're also paying for the lineage. That's why I learned with the Borbles, because the Borble community is very tight knit because it's not a popular breed. Thank God. I don't think anybody should ever have this dog unless they're professionals, to be completely honest. This dog gave me the
Hmm.
biggest run for my money, still does. But one of the things that I learned is like like the dogs who are out there that are the biggest and most protective, or maybe like the healthiest but lean, that you're paying way extra for that lineage because you're like, I want that lineage because I know that this dog is going to be this big or this size, and I want to do weight pulling or I want to do whatever. And so
Hmm.
that's something that I've even seen in my own ethos is some of my people who are close around me have opted into cheaper dogs, purebred dogs.
Hmm.
Then you're dealing with all of the diseases and things that come, and it's heartbreaking because you're like, well, I'm going to purchase this dog for $500 when you're
Yeah.
looking at other Dobermans or other purebred dogs and they're 5,000, 6,000, and you're
Yeah.
like, what's the difference? And what you're paying for typically is going to be the genetics of the dog. So it's like our food that we eat, right? If I
Hmm.
go out and buy a pack of strawberries and they're grown organically down the road,
Organic. Yeah.
right, you're going to pay more for those strawberries because they're better quality and they don't have all of the garbage on them, right? But if you buy a pack of strawberries that was imported from another country, non-organic, you're going to pay probably more than half the price of that. But are they strawberries? Do they taste the
Yep.
same? Probably. But what you're in, so that's something I always explain to dog owners too, is they don't realize that when you, you get what you pay for. When you're looking on paper, how come this Doberman or this Shepherd or this Malinois is $500 and then this one over here is $5,500 and I have to apply for it? That's because you're getting what you're paying for. But one caveat to that, and I'd be interested on your take on this, talking about the smush nose dogs. Do you feel like, as a reputable breeder who works hard at producing well-bred dogs, do you feel like the designer dogs have ruined that regalness that you've had on pricing the dogs the way that you've priced it? Because then you could get a Frenchie that has longer hair and is air quotes blue or merle, and they're $10,000 because of you're
Oh,
getting that diluted color. Do you
yes.
feel like that's like messed with what you're doing because they're priced the same and you're like, well, that's actually a deformed animal. So what are your how do you navigate that?
I hate that. And anyone who's followed us on our Facebook and Instagram, we have gone on rants with this and have probably offended so many people. Um, and I don't care because honestly, at the end of the day, I care about the welfare of the animal, right? The
Yeah.
welfare of the animal is so important. Why would you bring in an animal into this world who has a hard time breathing or sounds like they're having like a heart attack just sleeping or can't get up the stairs on their own or has like eyes that are bugged out or tongues that hang out? I see a lot of like small dogs with tongues hanging out all the time, and people are like, oh, that's so cute. I'm like, no, it's not cute. It's a deformity. I
Mm.
don't know when we got into this stage in life in our society and our culture where we think deformities are cute.
I
Um,
think I think people don't know that they are like the silver labs and the blues and the merrills and the long haired on the dogs that aren't supposed to be long haired, right? Like I don't you think that the pet owners who are seeing these things, they're buying off of looks?
Yeah, and they don't realize sometimes, the white with blue eyes is more
Right.
prone to being deaf. And they have no idea. Nobody told them that, right? And I think, yeah, these weird designer breeds, I don't even want to call them breeds because in my opinion, they're not. They're just somebody who's just decided to breed for um exotic traits, I guess,
Yeah.
unscrupulously. Um, that's really ruined it, I think, for people who work really hard to make healthy, functional dogs. Um,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Yeah,
And I'll even go out and even probably offend more people right now when I say like the whole, not for all dogs, I don't know, but at least for us with German Shepherds, like the whole, concept of showing dogs and like prancing them around in the ring and getting titles for that. I know that that's a huge thing. It's very enjoyable for many people, but also it breaks my heart to see, let's say, shepherds that are bred specifically for a particular type of color, or pigmentation in their coat, or that like nice dark black saddle and a particular weird angulation that's happening, and in the rear, they want to go for particular ear carriage, right? And like I said,
mm,
rich pigmentation and a particular gait when they're running. It's all looks though. It's a beauty contest. And we have always said, like at our kennel, we don't even think that that's titles coming from shows like don't mean anything to us because that's not functional. Like I not supportive at all in any way of just beauty contests. It doesn't make any sense. It's
what are
not
they
biological. It doesn't help the dog in any way. It's literally just aesthetics.
when they're doing the conformation on these dogs, so the way that the dog looks and in the stacking of the dog isn't, and I don't know, so I'm asking, is that part when you're doing like a dog show, isn't their structure judged, like aren't they judging the structure of the dog, the integrity of the dog? Aren't they saying this dog is a well-bred dog, or is that not, I don't know.
Yeah. And I don't know where those standards come from.
Mm,
'Cause they certainly don't look very functional.
right.
Uh, and you can pull some of those dogs off of the beauty contest ring and try to put them to work, and they won't work. Or they've got, who knows? Like
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah, but
know. I just know they're not selecting for things that I think that are biologically important for the dog to be functional or for even the welfare of the animal.
right, like temperament and things, you think? Or
Yeah, I mean, one, and I don't remember what year this was. I was watching the Westminster on TV. This could have been 10 years ago. I'm sure if we looked it up, we could probably find it. And there was one of the last few dogs that made it to the end, and it
mhm,
was like a Boston Terrier. And the lights were shining down, and it was on this like that, iconic purple carpet. And this dog was, they're like Boston Terrier number 523 or whatever. And
mhm,
the guy's like walking the dog out and it's prancing and it's prancing and it's looking cute. And then it walked over the icon. It was like the Westminster icon on the carpet that you can see from like a drone
yeah,
footage type thing. And when it got to that part of the carpet, it like flipped it like flipped out. It like jumped up and like literally jumped off to the side, I guess, because there was I don't know, shadows or a change in color or whatnot, and it was totally fearful. And it just flipped out. And then you can hear like, the judges were like, oh, ho, ho, how cute is that? Oh, I guess he's, a little freaked out about that scary looking icon on the carpet. And I was thinking, okay, that's not funny.
mm,
I would be embarrassed. Like seriously, if I were the breed, I'm like, man, we gotta work
mhm,
on that fearfulness there. So again, when you get so worried about looks, and you're selecting for morphological traits, I think somehow you've got to relax on other traits. There's only so many traits you can select for, right? So if you're going hard and heavy on certain traits, you're going to relax on
yeah,
other ones.
yeah,
Um,
no, that makes sense.
and that's worrisome to me because we need to start focusing on important traits like health and
Hmm.
temperament. and function. Like, who cares, like, how deep that pigmentation is or how red it is, you know? Like,
Yeah.
just does that really matter in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah, and I think it's that's the hard thing though is for the consumer, they don't care, right? They're not they they don't care. I think the general public, people who are the majority of people who are listening to this podcast, when they're looking for a dog, I think the first thing they're looking for is looks. They like, I want a dog that looks like this, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and then I want a dog that I don't even know if they go to temperament. It's just like I want this dog.
Yeah. Oh,
And
it's so pretty. I love those blue eyes, and it looks like a
yeah.
wolf or something.
Yeah. Yeah, especially when movies pop out, right? And then there's like
Yes.
so it always
Yeah.
worries me when Hollywood gets involved because then there's, you know, all these things going on. Okay, what what would you say, like, if you could put in a couple sentences, what if somebody were to say to you, because you breed dogs, why do genetics matter? Why should they matter to dog owners?
The genetics of the dog is going to give you the best predictability in terms of what that dog's going to be like. And then you need to take that information and seriously and honestly assess how well that's going to fit in your lifestyle and your ability to be able to um, give to this dog what it needs. I think that's the big, it's the fit. Like I said, it's like if you have this genetic, are you a good fit for that type of genetic? Do you have the capacity within your lifestyle and your home and your experience, and your level of patience and yada yada yada? Like, is that a good fit for the genetic? So it's kind of like somebody saying, "Oh my God, that is a gorgeous Ferrari.
Mhm.
I want that car. It's beautiful. It's hot." But you've never known how to drive anything like that, and you've only ever driven like a
Yeah,
Toyota Echo. Are you the best driver to be able to take that car to its fullest potential? Can you drive that fast? Or are you just going to crash and burn?
right. Is it
Which,
safe? Right.
yeah, is that safe for you? You might just drive it off the road because you're like, oh, I think I'm going to take this, a little bit faster. Next thing you know, you're in a ditch upside down in
Yeah.
flames.
Yeah. That's why I
And
created,
that can happen, right? Like that can
yeah,
happen
it
with
does.
an analogy.
That's why I created, that's like the ethos of my No Bad Dogs brand is that. It's like people are like, oh, I got this border collie because I saw that it was the smartest dog in the world and now it's biting everybody. And I'm like, no bad cars, right? No bad Ferraris. It's like, why did you get this dog? So, okay.
Yeah.
What's let's say this when you as a trainer who trains pet dogs as well, what is your first line of defense when somebody brings you a well-bred dog that's doing what the dog is supposed to do, but is terribly misbehaved in an improper fit? Example would be getting a cattle dog that is reactive and frustrated and is nipping people and reacting towards people and like, how do you handle that when somebody brings you a dog that's doing breed specific
Mhm.
things, exactly what some people would pay extra for, and it's
Yeah.
somebody's worst nightmare? How do you navigate that?
Oh man, that's so hard. It's so hard. Um, I mean, at the very worst, if somebody really feels once we've explored why this is happening, because it's a bad fit between the dog's genetics, like you said, and what they're capable of providing, I have like a sit down, like during usually a consultation, is like, look, now that we know this, and this is what the dog needs, and you've got a Ferrari, are you honestly going to be able to commit to learning how to drive this car? Like, we have to have an honest conversation. Don't tell me what you think I want to hear. I'm not here to judge or anything. How much commitment and time do you think you're able to give to this? How badly do you want to fix this? How badly do you want to keep this dog? And it's not a competition. It's just what's best for you and what's best for this dog. And if they say, "Yeah, man, like I'm all in. I didn't know and I want to give the best to this dog." And I've seen people do that and they're amazing and they become so dedicated, hardcore. They're like doing all the homework and things work out beautifully and that's like the fairy tale ending that is awesome that we all want.
Callie.
But sometimes you get like people who try and then they think they try and then they honestly come back later on and say, I don't think I can do this, or I don't think I can maintain this sustainably. And then it comes to that hard conversation is what are we willing to do at this point? Should we rehome?
Hmm. Yeah.
That's a heartbreaking conversation to have. But if you've got a young dog that's only like 2 or 3, and you look for the long term, like over the next decade, it's like, can you do this for the next 10 years? Like it's that whole honest conversation part, right? And it's painful sometimes, really pain. Like we get people crying a lot actually in consults. It's like terrible, but it comes down to the whole honesty thing. And I think we could have avoided a lot of this pain and suffering from the beginning if they had had a breeder that had tried to talk them down in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always this mental gymnastics too of somebody who just adopts a dog out of the shelter. And because then you, because then it's like their heart was in the right place. The dog needed a
Yeah.
home, you know, and then now you have to say, well, now that you're attached and you love this dog and the kids love the dog, I hate to break it to you, but unless you drastically change almost everything about what you're doing, you're never,
Yeah.
yeah, you're never gonna get better. And that is always that's why I tend to same thing. I mean, that's my approach too, is just telling people this can work. So here's hope. However, this is what it's going to take. And it's entirely up to, it's not up to the dog. It's not up to me, no matter how much, because I think one thing as trainers that we see oftentimes, and I know that this is a big sticking point for a lot of people, is people kind of look at us as we can fix everything.
Yeah.
And you can't fix genetics,
Yeah.
right? Like you can't, again, like my Borbal, perfect example. I use him a lot. He's made me very relatable to my audience because, having this little computer Dutchie basically is this little robot because that's just what she likes to be, is like I'll do anything as long as I can play with you, is not really relatable to the majority of people who follow me and try to get advice. But now having this Borbal that's giving me an entire run for my money, it's a lot more relatable. But for him, I always tell people it's like telling a fish not to swim. You're not going to be able to do it. And one of the things that I'm starting, and listen, it's been a wonderful career changing endeavor with this dog because he's
Mhm.
really challenging,
Mhm.
and it's given me so much to chew on. And I started, and I'm thinking and I'm brainstorming, and I'm walking around with him. He's intact. He's between the ages of 7.5 months to about a year. He was really reactive on the leash. When he saw a dog, he thought that his entire job was to scare the other dog away and to be big and scary. And it kind of is, per his genetics of being a very protective, this is my neighborhood. I've already peed on everything and you're in my backyard, even though it's my neighbor's yard.
Mhm.
And and so I had this epiphany one day where I'm walking him, and he's much better now, I will say. Excuse me. And I think a lot of that has to do with maturity and
Yeah.
clarity and figuring out how to handle situations, and he loves food. So it's like one of the only dogs in my career that I've ever been able to counter condition successfully just off of, if you look at me, you get paid. And it's been remarkable. But one of
Wow.
the things I had this epiphany. I was walking and I was talking to a client one day after my walk, and I said, you know what? My super protective 8 month old intact Borble is, yes, reactive on the leash at times. And to be frank, I think I would be disappointed if he wasn't. I was like,
Yeah.
if another dog was approaching and he just could care less, that means
Yeah.
that suspicion isn't
Right.
isn't popping up.
Fair.
That yeah, and
Yeah.
that's something that it really kind of helped me understand the genetics of the dog. I met the mom and the dad and everything, and there's just this breed itself has just taught me so much about dogs and so much about breeds and so much about development, and it's been an incredible journey, and I'm really happy I did it. My wife might tell you otherwise, but that was just this kind of epiphany one day where I was like, the same thing if people come to the house.
Hmm.
He's very like, I need to know who you are, and if I don't know you, I'm going to be pretty scary. He's
Right.
never bitten anything in his life, but the point of his size and his intensity is really all that you need. But my point is he I honestly would be kind of upset if I now have this dog that eats 5 pounds of raw food a day that could care less about who comes on my property because I
Right.
got him for that. So
Right.
when
Exactly.
when when my kids are out in the front yard and I down him in the driveway and I go inside to grab something, I'm very confident and I feel very good. And same thing with my wife when she's home alone when I'm on the other side of the world doing a dog training seminar.
Mhm.
I know that dog walking around my property is such it just makes me feel better, right?
Yeah.
So there is that too, right? When you're developing, like what you said was very interesting, I think, to a lot of dog people, is you're saying we're not holding anything back. We're not stopping anything. We're not correcting anything. We want these dogs to run through a wall like the Kool-Aid man, right?
Mhm.
So that's an interesting concept for people because I think, let's say your dog that you bred, there's let's just say a dog with the same drive of your intentionally bred Malinois German Shepherd mixes. Somebody gets a dog like that and they don't do anything with this dog. It can turn
Um,
into a
a
nightmare, right?
disaster. It'd be an absolute disaster.
And that's where it's hard for us dog trainers to navigate this. And I said this recently to a guy who had a cattle dog that was very intense, very just high strung and frustrated all the time. And I said, you know what? You have a really good cattle dog, but not for you. And one of the first things we did is we put on the treadmill and he calmed down and everything. But anyway, it's just like I wanted to throw that out there about my personal experience with Burley is he was doing horrible shit.
Right.
And to be frank, like same thing for you. If you bred one of these dogs and it went to test and you did a track, you did a line of a track and there was kibble everywhere and your dog just maybe wanted to stay in the car, you'd be like,
What's going? Yeah. What?
what's going on? Or
Yeah.
if you had like a PSA dog and a decoy popped out of a corner and they just were like wagging their tail and they're like,
Yeah.
"What's
We're
up,
like,
dude?"
no, that'd be an ultimate failure.
That's what I mean though, is like I've recently started to have those conversations with, my audience who are, millions of dog owners who are trying to figure things out with dogs, and it's been very enlightening. Is I kind of had this epiphany, and it's switched so much with my cadence of I honestly would be upset if my dog didn't get
Hmm.
very aggressive when somebody was at my door if he didn't know him because I'd be
Yep.
like, dude, I got you to be
That's your
big and
job.
yeah. So anyway, um, I want to shift gears a little bit because I think we could talk about genetics a long time, but genetics matter, and
Mhm.
all of the reasons that we talked about. What do you? I know that you have a background in nutrition, which is probably a whole other podcast, but like, what do you feed your dogs? what are you finding as somebody who has a background in nutrition and not only the cool thing about you, which I've kind of talked about, is there's a lot of people who study and have PhDs in animal behavior and nutrition and other things, but you're actually boots on the ground, which is great because there's a lot of people who have these degrees, but they don't actually work with dogs. Like they don't actually handle dogs. They don't work with clients. They have these degrees and they work for and it's great and it probably has its purpose, but you're breeding dogs, training dogs, and working dogs with your degree. And that's something that actually from people who are listening probably find very interesting that there's a lot of people who have the degrees that you do that actually don't do that. They are very, I would say, clinical, if you will, where they're not actually. I mean, I've had PhD behaviorists euthanize dogs and give dogs prescription via Zoom.
Oh God.
You know what I mean? So, what's your talk to me about nutrition? Talk to me about what you feed your dogs and what you're, everything's subjective, right? For the most part. Like, what are you
Uh,
finding? What are you finding about nutrition that is out there with pet owners?
so I'm right now, I'm actually really lucky to be working with really amazing nutritionists and just soaking up information from them all the time, every day. So it's great to be in that environment. Um, and just seeing the nuances of what nutrition can do. I would say though, again, so if you ask me anything, my answer is always going to be very outcomes based. I'm not very much one of those, well, the textbook said this, and
Right.
theoretically it should be that, which is awesome. And it gives us guidance as to where we should be looking and where we should be exploring and what we do with data. Very important. But for me, I'm very practical and I like to just like, how does this work in the real world? And so for me, when it comes to nutrition and what we feed our dogs, I'm very functional. I would say there's no one right way to feed a dog, just like there's no one right way to feed people. So I say feed what works for your dog. If your dog is functioning well, they're healthy, they don't have all sorts of allergies and problems and whatnot, and they don't have all these issues, keep doing what you're doing. And we'll get a little bit into, kibble and raw and whatnot. But again, I am not of the opinion that there's one particular thing that you should never feed your dog. Um, so as an analogy, I would say like with people, you know how there's like gluten-free, gluten-free, you should eat gluten-free, gluten's bad, right? Like, oh my God, gluten's the devil.
Yeah.
And you know what? It can be if you're celiac. Absolutely. If you have celiac disease, you should not eat bread. You should not have gluten because that is seriously bad for you. However, if you're not and you don't have problems eating bread, enjoy your bread. Have a sandwich as part of a balanced diet with exercise and other really good food. I don't see why you can't because you're not celiac, but the other person is. Or is milk, oh, well, you shouldn't drink milk, you shouldn't have dairy, but then some dairy people say, oh, it's a great source of protein, this and that. You know what? And they're both true. There's not one that's actually lying. They're actually both true. But if you're lactose intolerant, man, you should not have milk. It is not part of a good diet for you. Somebody else, maybe who's an athlete and needs, I don't know, dairy or yogurt in their diet and they're performing at a really high level. And you know what? You can't say to that person, I don't think you should have dairy because the science says dairy's not good for you. But meanwhile, he's winning gold medals at the Olympics,
Yeah.
and is healthy. And it's like, I'm not in a position to tell you that dairy is not good for you when clearly you're kicking my ass at all these different, physical sports and whatnot, right? So it's outcomes to me. It's like, how do you feel? How are you doing? Um, so if your dog has a particular problem, whether it be, God knows, diabetes, or maybe they've got, urinary crystals, or maybe they've got God knows what, all sorts of different, there's all sorts of different functional diets these days too for different types of health issues that you have to choose carefully over. Um, so I would say feed what works for your dogs. So back to the question that I know you ask is how do we feed our dogs? We mainly feed our dogs raw. So everybody's on raw, balanced raw. Um, it works well for them. It gives them much better poops are a lot easier to handle. It becomes like a, hard, dry poop, which when you have a lot of dogs is a lot easier for cleanup. They love it. Um, everybody eats well, and everybody looks good and everybody's healthy. Now, there are times when, so yes, mainly raw, but I've got some dogs that are on kibble. So the guy who's barking in the background right now, he is not on raw. He was at one point, but now he's on a particular kibble diet, and there was a particular health reason for that. He almost died actually a couple of years ago. He got like a terrible infection in his spine, of all things. Yep, disco spondylitis. We are now a case study at our vets. Um, and basically, there's a whole reason why together as a group with his whole, vet care group decided that raw was not the best thing for him. And I don't want to get into the 2 years worth of medical issues with him, but he's on something else that's more appropriate for the condition that he had. Sometimes when well, actually all the times when our bitches are pregnant, we will top them up with some puppy kibble, and especially while they're lactating and they're having, when puppies are on board, she's got a huge requirement for like calories. She's making milk, so we'll give her the raw, but we'll also sometimes top that up with some puppy kibble because she needs that extra calories, and we want to make sure that she's not going to go out of balance. We need things that are balanced, and any of the good quality kibbles out there, they're all nutritionally balanced in terms of like micro and nutrient analysis to make sure that that's the case. We don't want anyone coming out of balance when they're lactating, for example, right? It's a very um,
Yeah, it's just
interesting
like with people.
time in their life.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
just like with people. Like when my excuse me, when my wife was breastfeeding and other women who breastfeeded, that they need more
yeah,
they need more protein, they need more calories because now they're producing
yep,
meals for another human. So
yeah.
that's just how
Yeah.
that goes. It makes total sense.
So, yeah, I mean, and it's not even like what do you feed as if you feed one thing for the entire life of the dog. There are different stages where they need a slightly different diet, right?
Yep.
Puppy, adult, senior, if they have a certain disease or if they're, whelping or lactating, you got to make sure that you adjust for that. So I would say, again, for us, it's very much in flux, and we have to be flexible and we have to be adaptable in terms of what their needs are at that time. So again, very functional based.
And what would and that's exactly why I started feeding raw myself
Hmm.
is my one of the dogs that I was living with had really bad hot spots,
Hmm.
and he was the brother of the dog that I had, so we were both living with each other at the time, and the doctor, the veterinarian that we went to was like, you got to try some raw food. The kibble's
Yeah.
likely flaring this up.
Hmm.
And we switched to raw food, and within 2 weeks,
It's
no more
gone.
hot spots. And I was
Yeah,
like,
we see that
okay,
a
I
lot.
don't, yeah, and I was like, I don't need my dog to have hot spots to understand that this food is going to be better. And then he was a Saint Bernard, and when I switched his poop when he was eating 4 cups of kibble a day, he was pooping out 4 cups of kibble a day. And
Yeah.
when he was eating 4 pounds of raw, he would poop out nuggets, like little
Yeah.
tiny owl pellets. And I knew
Yeah.
from my fifth grade experiment of dissecting owl pellets and finding the little they basically were pooping out uh well, not owls were because they don't, but they were processing and breaking down and then regurgitating, or for dogs they would poop out what they don't need, which would be the bones and the fur and things. And so
Yeah.
I found that very interesting that when my dog would eat 4 pounds of food, he would poop out these
A
little tiny
lot.
nuggets. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I was like, wow, like the what his body is nutritionally absorbing is much different with raw food than it was
Yeah.
with kibble. Because when he was on kibble, it was loose and it was smelly and
Yeah.
it was 4 pound, it was a mound of poop. And I was like,
Yeah.
and to your point, it's much easier to clean up raw poops because it's like little tiny pellets that you can,
Yeah.
basically kick around your yard. What
Yeah.
what's
A lot easier.
What's your biggest takeaway with, obviously, and again, that's, I think it's great that you're practicing what you preach, but with your background in nutrition and just owning dogs and breeding with dogs and being around clients' dogs, what's your takeaway on the biggest differences between raw food and a kibble fed dog?
Oh my God. So here's the thing that I've learned over the past few years just working around pet nutritionists and just looking at all sorts of different diets is that you can't say kibble and raw because within kibble there's a huge gradation
Yeah,
of really low quality food to some really high quality kibbles. And the same thing can be said for raw too, because there are some people at home that just do like sort of homemade meals with no real understanding of how to balance that properly. And that's really hard. I gotta say, I'm
yeah,
not sure that you can actually do that properly at home without knowing carefully what the heck you're doing because you have no way of doing nutrient analysis in your kitchen. The best you can do is probably just take a look at volume. I've got volume of this, I got a volume of that. I'm going to put in some bone here at maybe 10 or 15% of, the total. But that's making a lot of assumptions, and I think that's pretty dangerous because put it this way. So just basically, people assume that, okay, if I'm going to give them bone, then they're going to get their calcium. Makes sense. The issue is how much? How much do you think you need? How much do you think your dog needs? Do you actually know percentage? Do you know in micrograms? Like, do you actually know? So that's number one, and most people don't know. And number two, even something like as simple, and I say simple, it's not simple, calcium. It's not just calcium. Something like that is like it's not just the level of calcium, it's the ratio of calcium to phosphorus that's really important. And a lot of people don't know that. Like, you need to have both, and they have to be in the right ratio for that calcium to actually do what it's supposed to do in the body. So it could be like a 2-to-1 ratio or whatnot. There's no way to do this in like in a home kitchen and just say, oh, I'm gonna throw them a chicken breast, right? Like, how much protein is in there? How much zinc is in there? Like, and so that's the thing, right? Like, doing
yep,
this at home is very different. Whereas if you go buy really good, high quality raw, that has been actually balanced and has gone through nutrient analysis, and there aren't, I don't know of too many companies, but there is one in particular I know who does that very well. And you have to look for that and be aware of that. So just make sure that no matter what you're looking at, it should be balanced. And they can't say the word balanced if it hasn't gone through some sort of nutrient analysis. So that's for raw. And then for kibble, it's the same thing too. Like, you got to be aware of like what are good quality ingredients? Are there too many grains and carbs in there? Is it, meat first? How much fiber is in there? Because if you have too much, fiber, if you look on the label, that's when you get a lot of poop, and when you decrease that, it helps sort of not get it so like that mushy poop type thing. You
yep.
honestly, like the variation and gradation of quality, even within kibble, is huge. And you got to do your research to look for that. So, but to your point, I find the same thing as if somebody comes to us and says, oh, our dog has hot spots or allergies and she's allergic to everything. I'm like, why don't you try raw? And most of the time, that does the trick. The thing with a raw diet that I really like is that there's not many ingredients in it. It's like meat with a couple of other things in it. Maybe some kale, a little bit, maybe not. And some bone and important organ meats in there. Again, just to complete that nutrient analysis profile. But for the most part, there's not like 25, 30 different ingredients and a whack of different preservatives and colorings and all sorts of, byproducts. And
Yep.
I think that's where people get into problems because when there's so many things on that label and so many ingredients, you don't know what your dog's allergic to. So
Yep.
it's even like with people when you've got some sort of bad, allergy, what's the first thing your doctor will tell you? They're going to put you on one of those elimination diets. So let's take
Yep.
dairy away first week. Let's take gluten away. And then you finally get down to such a small amount of food, you're going to figure out what thing it is that bothers you. But then you're going to be left with basically meat, fruits, and vegetables.
Yep. And that's yeah, and I've yeah, I've been doing a lot of research the last couple of years on nutrition, and so I think becoming a dad has really made me want to live the healthiest and obviously try to live the longest. It just changes everything, right? And so
Yeah,
I've been doing a lot of research on nutrition and things like that. And one of the things, like you said, is there's a variance to kibble, there's a spectrum of low quality to high quality. Like if you go
hmm
get a burger from McDonald's versus a Michelin star restaurant, it's going to
yeah,
be literally the difference between night and day. Literally.
yeah.
Like it's a very binary. Good, bad, highly you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
highly processed. I mean, McDonald's may taste just as good. Like it may taste just as good, but
yeah.
it's so I've learned that too, even to your point on like the dairy. When I used to drink, like when I was a kid, I would drink like cereal, and I still do. Cereal is like
Mhm.
my like go-to snack. And I know
Yeah,
it's not the best for you, but now I've gotten like organic, like whatever. So my point is when I would now as an adult, my whatever changed, right? And I can't eat ice cream. I couldn't eat
mhm.
the milk that was in a lot of these things, especially when you're eating cereal, right? Like so.
Yeah,
Then I had this it was 100% A2 grass-fed milk, and
yeah,
and it's
yeah,
so good, and I don't have any problems with it, zero. And so and I did research on it,
yeah,
and essentially from my understanding, like the cows with the A2 gene, I'm not sure exactly what it is and how they find it, but they source the cows they test them for the A2 gene, and it's just a different type of milk apparently.
mhm.
And I can drink that fine. And so my
Right.
point is if you go to the dollar store and you get their whole milk versus
Yeah,
uh, you know this $20 jug of milk that I get at the
not the
organic,
same.
it's not the same. And it's the same thing with
Yeah,
kibble. And people like I work with a company called Refeed Raw, and I really advocate for raw food, and I have just because it's helped me. So it's
yeah,
not like raw food has helped me and my dogs for a long period of time. It's helped a lot of my clients. But if you are feeding kibble, just understand that there is that spectrum. You can get a really high quality, less processed kibble with less fillers, right? So if we
yeah.
talk about like a low quality kibble would be like a Purina that the first ingredient is cornmeal, or it's like cornmeal and then the next ingredient is like yellow dye or something. It's like
Yeah, right?
then you go to
Byproduct.
like
Yeah,
what I used to feed as kibble was Origin, and I think it's a Canadian product. I
it
believe it's
is.
like right
Yeah,
Orijen,
yeah,
and that's something I used to feed. And it's a better product, but there's better products than that. And so when you are trying to, for me, the biggest thing that I realize outside of the like you said the dog in front of me of what works and what doesn't with the hot spots and the poop and the energy and the ears and the eyes and the goop and all of that
yeah,
was was also just kibble traditionally is highly processed.
yeah.
Raw meat traditionally is not highly processed.
Mhm.
And the reference to my own health of eating organic, non-processed food and getting very down the rabbit hole on biohacking and nutrition, trying
Mhm.
to figure all of that out to feel better,
Yeah,
it's the same reference to my dog's diet is if I fed my dog highly processed kibble every single day for their entire life, every meal,
mhm.
the likelihood and the development of certain things such as cancers, and in ear infections and all of the things that can happen with highly processed food over the years. That's why I made the switch. But I
Hmm.
also have had dogs that lived until they were 18 that did fine on kibble, and it's just a variance of maybe you won't see a physical difference or even a behavioral change or even the skin, the nails in the ears. You may not see that, but how they feel may change. The energy levels may change. If I know right now if I went and ordered fast, I haven't had fast food in years, but if I went right now and ordered like a cheeseburger from McDonald's, it's going to be
Hmm.
so good.
Yeah.
It's going to be like the best cheeseburger ever because that's what they're
Yeah.
freaking really good at. But my body will, it will wreak havoc on my body because it's like
Yeah.
poison, processed dyes, chemicals, and my body's just gonna freak out. And it's gonna suck for about 2 days. But anyway, that's just my raw food
It
experience. I made it very simple. It's either processed or it's not, you know.
And that's exactly it. Like the raw diets, like I said, there's like one or two ingredients in it. That's it. It's hard to get anything wrong when it
Yeah.
comes to that type of ingredient. And when I mean wrong, I mean not nutrient analysis. I mean by having ingredients in there that cause allergies or inflammation. I think that's the biggest issue
Mm,
right now is
right.
all these highly processed, low quality ingredients are pro-inflammatory and they cause systemic inflammation. And when you get systemic inflammation in the gut, I swear to God, like 99.9% of our diseases all stem from
Yeah.
the gut and generally inflammation, leaky gut. When that is out of sorts and you've got some sort of dysbiosis going on in there, and it's hard to tell because it's sort of low grade and subclinical and chronic, that's where the diseases are eventually going to come is through systemic inflammation chronically. And I think, you're just more likely to have that happen when you've got more ingredients that are, like I said, pro-inflammatory. So,
Right. If you ate something processed and you had a flare up in any way, you said, "Hey, what'd you have for lunch?" You said, "Oh, I just ate this burger, this bag of chips or whatever." And you're like,
yeah,
or you just bought a hot dog off a stand. It's like, "Oh, we need to do an elimination." It's like, well, there were 150 things in that hot dog and that bun and that ketchup, so you're
that's
like,
right.
okay, we're dealing with that right now. I've learned a lot about that with my youngest, shy 7 months now, but he has really bad eczema. And same exact thing. Like my wife and I have been going through all of the things, and what we have found is the gut and the
Hmm.
biome is what causes, and a lot of it's genetics. So
Hmm.
eczema, asthma, allergies in general, things like that are typically genetic, and that's what we've realized. So we did this gut biome test,
Okay.
send it in to a company, and they do a test, and they sent it
Yeah.
back, and they
Yeah.
said your son is likely going to have eczema, bone, like all these things. And we were like,
Uh,
man. And then they went over like, so he's 7 months now, and his gut is acting of a 4-month-old baby. So it's not processing thing. The gut is so anyway. So I've educated myself recently in the last couple of months on how much that plays a role in humans as well. So
uh-huh.
same thing with dogs. If they're basically eating junk every day, they're
Yeah.
going to have problems, probably, likely, more than
Yeah.
likely. You know,
Yeah.
what
Exactly.
in your experience with raw food, like, do you, because I talk to a lot of people about raw food, and a lot of people talk about like, well, they have canines for a reason. Their gut can, their stomach has enough acid in it to break down b bone, uncooked bone. Like,
Yeah.
do you, what's your feedback and take on dogs? Like, raw food is it's what they're supposed to be eating, right? It's like what their body is, what their DNA is set up for. I mean, what's your take on that, or do you have a take on that?
Can you zone in a little bit more on
Yep.
that question
So
there?
dogs having canines, right? And
Hmm.
and dogs stomachs being able to break down bone, And
Hmm.
the word on, the word that we talk about a lot is it's an appropriate diet for the animal that they are, right? So
Hmm.
they're meant to be ripping, tearing, chewing, crunching these bones. I mean, I have friends that will give their dog an entire, chicken,
Yep.
and
Yeah,
they're
I've
eating it
done
feathers. They're
that.
eating the feathers. They're ripping the beak off. They're chewing on the
Yeah.
legs, and you're like,
Yeah.
holy shit. And of
Yeah.
course, dog owners, which are dog pet owners and professional dog people, are two separate beings, right? Like it's
Yeah.
the difference between going to a hockey game and watching the hockey players and actually, being a hockey player. Two separate things, right? And you can yell from the rooftops as an audience member, "Hey, you suck!" Like, "Hey, you should have." It's like, yeah, you come down here and do this. It's like you think we're on the same page. It's not it's not good or bad. It's just they're two separate things. And so when a pet owner sees, I remember I did I did 4 summers at a wolf sanctuary in Colorado, and this baby bird fell out of a tree, and there was all these people around because you can go and you can visit, and it's a self-sustained, it's a pretty cool place, and all these people were around, families and stuff. The bird fell down, wolf came up, boop, popped in his mouth, chewed on it, and
Yeah.
guts were falling out, and these people were mortified, and I'm like, what did you think was going to happen here? It's like, so my
Yeah.
question is like, with your experience with dogs in general and nutrition, like, do you feel like what a dog is made up right now with the canines and their digestive system and their ability to break bone down and process these things? I mean, do you think that dogs are supposed to be eating raw food and not eating processed kibble?
Well, I mean, I can only speak with what I know works for us, and most of our dogs are on raw for most of the time. And like I said, if we need to supplement, then we do. They do well with it. I know, like to your point, it's been scary for some people to see certain things like an entire chicken being fed. I've actually done that, like the entire whole chicken. I did
Yep.
not butcher it. I did not take legs off or take literally a whole chicken. I threw it to one of our girls before. She loved it, went at it, crunched the whole thing, ate it, no problem. I think it terrifies some people when they think, oh my God, what if they like, choke on bones and whatnot? And we've
Or
never
it's
had
raw
that.
meat,
Or
right? Like,
yeah, and I've always said, like, what wolf or coyote or hyena has ever had problems
right.
choking on bones? This
Yeah,
is what
well,
they
that's what I
do
mean.
every day.
Yeah,
It's never been an issue. Now, I do say though, it's got to be raw. Don't ever like give them cooked bones because they do
right,
shatter and they can be, so again, you got to know the little things to do and not to do. Um, but it's worked really well. And they really thrive on that. Now, I do think though, just because they have the canines and they do eat meat and they should be eating meat, um, it doesn't mean that they cannot do well eating other things. So, if you look at wild canids, and you go through their poop, there are periods of time when they're actually eating some grains.
yeah,
Who was it now? There was somebody I knew who did like a study on like coyotes in northern Ontario, and they were like going through their poop and found that there was quite a bit of corn in there. Now they're opportunists, really. I mean, these are
yep,
wild animals, and when they can't hunt things down or deer, they will go through farmers' fields and they'll eat corn. And that's fine because that's what they need to do. It's like they'll eat berries if they have to, whatnot. So it can be quite diverse. But for the most part, yeah, fresh meat, why not? It's what they're meant to be eating. And I know that that's what our dogs really thrive on. So until it stops working well for us, that's my
right.
go-to.
Yeah, no, it's a great answer. I kind of I definitely fall under the same type of mentality of what is working and what isn't working. And even if I do see somebody say, well, if and that's the problem, is as I've educated myself over the years, I've realized how much, I don't want to say lying, but how much misleading things can be because of money. So
Oh, yeah.
like when you see companies like Hills or Mars, who own these huge dog food companies, Science Diets, and they're paying their veterinarians to endorse this product. So when you go to your veterinarian who has this wonderful degree in what is going to help and keep your dog alive and healthy and safe, and of course you trust them and they're saying this is what you should eat, it's only, not only, I shouldn't say that, but there there is some bit of where you're getting paid for it as well. And so there is that. And to be fair and to be objective, I do get kickbacks from companies like We Feed Raw. However, I've been feeding raw a decade before I had even a professional relationship with them. It's not like they came on board and said, "Hey, we want you to feed raw because you can sell product for us." It was like, "Hey, you feed raw and we'd love to partner with you exclusively so you can talk about our products because we want to be able to help other people order the raw food that you've been talking about for years." But
Mhm.
I think that the more I've realized that co colleges and academia, places like Harvard University, have admittedly said the things that we're talking about in whether it's cholesterol or heart disease is not true. We were paid by Coke and Pepsi and these companies to actually put out these reports and talk about these things. The moment I started realizing that these big companies that are contributing to obesity and not actually interested in our health, more of getting us addicted to their products, the sugars and all of
Yeah.
the things, I started going, my 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 trust in maybe even this the scientific community has really changed because of that. And we see that even in the dog space too. How much, and this is just, we don't have to get into this too much because it's to me it's kind of like a beating on the drum a little bit that I've already done and I've kind of already said my piece about it. But how much have you looked into, we talked about it last podcast, but how much have you looked into some of the science that's out there that backs n never telling a dog no and never correcting a dog? I mean, have you gone through some of these
Mhm.
things, having a PhD in animal welfare and behavior yourself? Like, let's just say nobody's ever, let's just say somebody's listening to this and they saw a study that was put out by a science organization or group that said, if you punish your dog, you will ruin your relationship and you should only use positive reinforcement to train your dog. You have way more experience in these studies than I ever will. What is your, could be hot take, could be 5 seconds, it could be 20 minutes. I mean,
Oh, sweet
what
Lord.
is your message to dog owners who are conflicted about what they're seeing online and what the realities are about these such scientific studies about animal behavior?
Oh my God. Tom, you and I talked about that for like 4 hours last time. And it was painful then, and it's still painful now, this topic. It just doesn't seem to go away. And I gotta say, when I see some of these force-free trainers talk about it, it's very compelling. And they play on people's heartstrings and they make people feel like sacks of crap for doing otherwise. And then they pull up this supposed science. And I will say that it is, but there's good science and there's bad science. That's the problem. There's like good everything, like the nutrition we talked about or whatever. There's everything's on a spectrum. And the reports and the studies that they're talking about, there hasn't been one to date that I know of that's actually a really good scientific report on the use of punishment and its effects on the overall welfare of the animal and whether it's, efficacious or not. And here's the reason why. And I said this just like not too long ago. When you go through any of the studies that are being reported, okay, so first of all, many of them are just surveys, and surveys are not studies. Surveys are just, basically asking dog owners how they feel and what they think they saw when their dog was correct it or not correct it. That's not very good science. That's literally a survey, right? And it's very subjective. But where I really want to get into are the actual scientific studies that like put dogs into different groups. There's a positive, reward group, and then there's a punishment group, and they break it down even further into like what kinds of punishment, whether it be like an e-collar stimulation or prong collars or all sorts of different aversives. The problem with those studies is that you cannot recreate what a dog trainer does in the field and put that into a scientific framework. Because, as you know, and I think I said this before, you could work, let's say, 6 dogs today, okay? And you've got a whole toolbox of tools. The way you deal with the first dog and the second dog and the third dog and the fourth dog, they're not going to be the same because the dog in front of you is different. You might have to adjust the way that you offer a correction, like literally in the middle. So you might walk a husky in and it's like you think, okay, I'm going to use this tool, then you use it, and maybe it doesn't exactly yield the response that you're looking for. So what you're going to do is you're going to pivot because you're a good trainer. You're going to pivot, you're going to be adaptable, and you're going to look at the dog and you're going to say, what can I change here to make this more effective for this dog? You're going to go in your toolbox, you're going to find something else, and you're experiencing, how to pivot and continuously adapt your training methods to the dog in front of you. We can't capture that. We can't capture that fluidity. We can't capture those changes that you do in the field, in your job, within the context of a scientific study. Why? Because the scientific study needs to be very structured. Everything has to be the same. So it's like, okay, well, maybe we'll take like the e-collar group and we're going to shock each dog, 5 times at a level 30, let's say. Well, that's a stupid method of looking at an e-collar, isn't it? Because why would you shock them 5 times? Maybe that dog needs, I don't know, once. Maybe another dog needs it 20 times. And maybe 30 is too high for this sensitive dog and not high enough for another dog, which, by the way, I was just with a dog 2 days ago who cannot feel anything even on an e-collar technology at a level 30. Doesn't even flip. Like literally, it's like, how does this dog just not have any nerve endings? We don't know.
Mm.
Whereas like an 8 or a little tingle at a 10 will cause like an ear flinch at the dog, an hour before. You can't recreate that into a scientific study. Scientific studies need to have every dog exactly the same, handled exactly in the same way, and that's not how dog trainers actually train in the real world. And so when you look at those results, like, what does that mean? It's meaningless. It's completely meaningless. And because that's not the way you would train in real life. Number two, you're looking at only the stress responses. They always say, oh, the dog stressed, or the dog yelped, or the dog looked like it was shut down and the ears were down and they were lip licking and they were showing all sorts of stress responses. And so bad, right? The dog was stressed out. It's like, yeah, the dog was stressed out because we're moving through a stressful situation here. They never look at the resilience. They never look at how the dog reacts a week later, a month later, what the relationship looks like longitudinally, a year later, what the quality of life between the owner and the dog is in the long term. They take that snapshot of what happened and how stressful the dog looked at the moment of the application of the aversive tool or correction or whatnot. And then they base the results on the fact that the dog showed stress. That to me says nothing. What dog doesn't show stress during a correction? The point
Well,
is that stress doesn't stay forever, it goes away. And with good training, they're not going to feel it anymore, right? Like the dog feels in control. You get a confident dog. You know all about that. You don't need me to tell you that. What I'm saying is those studies can't capture good training and they don't incorporate the proper usage of the tool in those studies. And so the results are completely meaningless to me. Doesn't mean anything.
yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to touch base on it because preaching to the choir. for sure. I just find that dog owners, that's one big problem for them. Like when I put out a video on, uh, I had this cattle dog, same cattle dog actually, that was coming in super worked up, and I said I put him on a treadmill. We
Hmm.
talked. The dog didn't want to go on a treadmill because he was afraid of it,
Yeah,
and I had to force him on. And
sure.
so I said, here's the. I just used leash pressure, and he's like, no, I can't. And
Yeah,
then finally he was like, okay. And I turned it on, and he's like, oh,
yeah, freaking out. Yeah,
super stressed. I had to force the dog on by definition, which means I wouldn't let him off. I'm like, you can
yeah,
do this, dude. You got this.
yeah.
Within 5 minutes, he's at a really nice gait. Ka-doo, 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 ka-doo,
Yeah,
ka-doo. Ran for 15, 20 minutes. The guy brought the dog home, came back for another session the same day because we had like this 3-day program, but he was
yeah.
local. And he said for the first time he laid down and wasn't freaking out at home. And
There you
so
go.
I said the same thing that what you're saying is, and the reason why I wanted to bring it up is because dog owners have this hard time when people do say you should never do these things because of science. And of course, the science that they're referring to actually isn't real. It's not real science. They're typically polls given to
Hmm.
people that are in their. It's like if you sit down at a Chinese restaurant and you went around and you said, "Hey, do you like Chinese?" Yeah. Hey, do you like? Yeah, I'm here, aren't I? I'm eating this. Or if you go for a hike, right, and you see a bunch of people hiking, like, do you like hiking? Yeah, I
Yeah,
do, right? That so that's the kind of the same thing is they're polling people who are already in agreement of something, right? And so that I just wanted to bring it up because people, dog owners who are new to my podcast, newer to you, newer to me
yeah,
even, they still have this thing that they have to deal with when they are getting information from people saying if you do X, Y, and Z, you're
yeah,
ruining your dog. And not only me, because typically it's trainers who don't work with dogs, um, period. But they're saying the only thing that they're hanging their hat on is because science says it, and the science that they're actually referring to isn't real science, and the science that aren't necessarily polls are done in the same manner that you're speaking of. Is they there's just like we talked about with nutrition, there's this spectrum of we put a remote collar on a dog, we asked the dog to sit, they didn't sit, and we nailed them. What
hmm,
e-collar are you using? What level are you using at? Did the dog
hmm,
know sit? Was the person
hmm.
actually a trainer?
That's
And if
right.
none of those things are in line with a fair study, it's irrelevant.
Yeah,
And furthermore, let's say it was me doing it. E-collar, the dog was e-collar conditioned, which means they knew where it was coming from. They know how to shut it off. They know what it
hmm,
is. They knew the sit command, but
hmm,
maybe there was a dog across the hallway that he was really interested in. And I said sit. I corrected the dog. They got a momentary bit of spike of stress, cortisol fired off. The dog went into a sit. And then the next time I asked the dog to sit, even though they were stimulated, they sat. Two things. The result was the dog was stressed. That's a point of a correction. That's why we do it. Same
yeah,
thing as positive reinforcement. If we did positive reinforcement and the dog hated it, it wouldn't work. If we use positive punishment and the dog loved it, that wouldn't work. The point of a correction is to teach and to clarify and to cause a momentary bit of stress so the dog learns. And then so it's the same thing with the cattle dog that I worked with. The amount of stress that I had to induce on the dog, or you could say force the dog to go into the treadmill, paid off the dividends tenfold immediately because the dog actually was moving. So I know we talked about it for a long period of time, but again, there's people. I haven't talked to you in a couple of years now. I think it's since the last podcast went off,
yeah.
and maybe people haven't seen it. And so, but I do know that that is a sticking point for a lot of people where they go, "Man, everything
Mhm.
you're saying makes sense, Tom, or anybody else." However, I saw this one post from this one person, or I saw a comment on your page that said, um, that science disagrees with you, and I said you have to understand that that's not, even if it's real science by definition, it's not fair. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's like
absolutely.
it's so anyway. So I just wanted to just touch base on that with you really quickly. It wasn't I just wanted to see where you were at with it and express that. One thing I want to chat with you about too really quickly is, and maybe not quickly if you have a lot of information on it, from your professional opinion in your background, when is the appropriate time to intervene with medication with dogs who have behavioral issues?
Okay, let's open the can of worms. Oh my God. So let me ask you, how many of your clients are coming to you these days? Let's say the past year. Let's just say the past year. That say, Tom, my dog is on a whack of medications. The vet prescribed it, antidepressants. Maybe it's on Prozac, maybe it's on gabapentin, maybe it's on trazodone, maybe it's on a cocktail of all three. I've seen that actually. Um, do you feel like there's a higher prevalence of that happening right now? Because I sure do. I feel like everyone and their aunt is on some sort of medication. I did like a really quick, just sort of like a 1 minute ditty on like what I think is just this cultural obsession with medicating dogs for all sorts of behavioral issues. And I don't know, that was maybe a couple of months ago, and we got like hundreds of comments. And what really broke my heart was so many of those comments were from just regular, normal dog owners, regular people who have had their dogs on medication and they still have the problem and they don't know what to do because they went to a vet and they got the medication and their dog is, they say, I've heard words like zombie. I heard that yesterday. I was talking to a lady because her dog was prescribed trazodone. She said her poor girl was a zombie. And then just decided to take her off the meds because she'd rather deal with her dog's original problem than see her dog stoned out in the corner looking like a zombie. She couldn't stomach that. And then I also saw comments from other dog professionals. There was a lady who said that she runs a doggy daycare, and she said that she's seen in the past 2 years people who drop off their dog in the morning, about 50% of the people drop off their dogs along with a baggie of medications. That one blew my mind. Like, that's astounding to me. When did that happen? Why is this happening? This is insane. And I'm not saying that dogs should never be medicated. I never say never to anything. You know me well enough by now. Everything's case by case basis. But I think there's this go-to right now where people think that if there's some sort of problem, they're going to go to the vet and their answer is going to be in a pill of some sort because they went to a force-free trainer and it didn't help. So then they're like, I don't know what to do. So then they go to the vet, and the vet said, oh, you already went training? You've already seen a trainer? Yes, I did. Did it work? No, it didn't. Okay, well, training didn't work for you, so let's do meds. Okay, well, they did force-free training, so that wasn't right. That's number one. Then they're put on a cocktail of a bunch of things like SSRIs. So Prozac would be an example of an SSRI, which is basically a serotonin
Inhibitor,
reuptake
right? Yeah.
medication, which tinkers around with the levels of serotonin in your brain to help you feel a little bit more calm. The issue is there's now vets that are prescribing all sorts of medications for things like separation anxiety, aggression, hyperactivity running around in the house, too much, can't settle down, thunderstorm phobias to reactivity. Like these are all very different things. Like a dog having actual aggression to a dog having separation anxiety, the causation of the behavior is completely different.
Yeah.
And the behavior itself is different. Why would you just like throw an antidepressant to that? Like that itself doesn't even make sense to me. And I think what's happening is that these medications are blunting the response. It's not solving the issue. It's not getting to the root cause. It's just blunting the response. And so when you're mildly sedated, you can't be all aggressive and reactive because you're sedated, somewhat tranquilized, or you're numb. But people outwardly think, well, that solved the problem, but it didn't, did it? right? Like it's kind of like I'd say it's the exact analogy in human medicine and human
Yep.
mental health issues is if you've got maybe depression or anxiety, you might see a psychiatrist who's going to give you something to help take the edge off. But the real healing and the actual cure doesn't come through the medication. It comes through the psychotherapy, through
Yep.
the talk therapy, through the causation of what makes you feel that way in the first place. Let's find the root cause and fix that. Um, so it's not making any sense to me on why there's this insane amount of medication going on. Um, what are you seeing?
I think the roadmap for me that I think is happening, excuse me, is dogs who are going to the vet are not doing well with the vet. They're anxious, they're whining, they're pacing, they may be aggressive, they may be reactive, barking, lunging, muzzle, don't touch me. To be fair to them, they go to the vet twice a year and get poked and prodded and stuck with something, so it's not a great environment for them. Some dogs don't some dogs love people so much they're in their own way that they love the vet. But most dogs who go to the vet, it smells weird, it's small, they got slippery floors, people are in uniforms and they're in small little tiny rooms and they're rushed. And I think what's happening is the vets are going, I can't deal with your dog. It's dangerous. You need serious help. And they will then refer to a behaviorist. And you can please shed light on this. In my experience with behaviorists, their job and professional in their profession is to diagnose, not necessarily roadmap out the sustainable route for the cause or the sustainability of the thing to go away. Their job is to diagnose and to treat. And a lot of times, again, I have had PhD board certified behaviorist not even take the leash of the dog and diagnose medication because the dog was anxious, diagnose
Mhm.
medication because the dog was reactive. So I think what's happening is a dog owner is going into the vet for routine vaccines or whatever, and the dog's freaking out. The vet's like, this is dangerous. I don't like this. I want cute little kittens, gerbils, puppies, happy, friendly dogs that want to lick my face. I don't love being growled at by this Malinois or this border collie or this Corso. You need training and you need to go to a behaviorist. They go to the behaviorist. Behaviorist does, of course, the same exact thing. Most, in my experience, very subjective to me, the behaviorist, again, PhD board certified behaviorist who went to school for 15 years, don't touch the dog. They don't train the dog. They just look at the dog to diagnose. They say, yep, this dog's aggressive. This dog's anxious. This dog's reactive. Here's some medication to take the edge off. And I think that's the very easy roadmap that I'm seeing. So when they come into me and they say, I'm typically the fourth, fifth, third trainer.
Yeah.
Ah, man, and because of the way that my career is set up, I obviously post a lot of stuff online, so you organically will find me if you're at home looking for help with your dog. There's a good chance you're going to see my face, and there's another good chance you're going to click on something and you're going to say, this resonates, this makes sense. You're either going to watch things for free, you're going to send it for training, or you're going to send it for a consult. You're going to come in, and it's going to be, we're already on Gab, we're on all I've heard Benadryl, I've heard all sorts of different things to take that edge off. And so they're not going to the source of the problem. So again, we see this a lot with the blue healer that I'm talking about. Hey, this blue healer is anxious and nervous and frustrated and nippy and hurty and doing all these cat-like things and putting their head down and stalking, and then we're gonna medicate it. So then you take a dog that has the genetic disposition to be a working dog and wants to work, is confused why they're not working, and of course you're seeing a bunch of frustration in the household because they're not working. You're seeing all the things that can go wrong with getting a dog that's supposed to be doing something and not allowing it, and not, more importantly, not outletting it. Going to the vet says this is a nightmare. They go to the behaviorist agrees. Clinically, they say, yep, anxiety, I got a pill for that. Here you go.
Yeah.
That's what I am seeing. And then when they come in for training, and I kind of have a lot of different avenues of my business, but if they're doing a board and train at my facility with I don't have really anything to do with that. My staff do. they have a process in which they will start weaning medication off. They don't just stop at cold turkey. They wean
Yeah.
it off over a couple weeks just to see what's going on.
Hmm.
The only time that I have found appropriate medication would be dogs who are um, their their genetics. They were born a nervous mess,
Yeah.
and they can't. And same thing with people. Same exact thing. I had a conversation with one of my family members, and they were just going through it, and they said, I don't want to get on an SS because their doctor said, how about an SSRI, basically an inhibitor of such, and it provides you serotonin. And I just said, I said, I want you to do what you want. I said, but however, and I go, yeah, but I'm really struggling and I'm having a hard time getting out of this lull. And I said, not for nothing, but I have to work really hard to stay happy and to stay focused. I cold plunge and I sauna and I work out and I lift weights and I meditate and it's like I have
Yeah.
to work so hard to stay stable. Not that I'm going super low and there are people who do, and that's where these medications are absolutely life changing. And I'm not taking that away. But I find practitioners typically and I just was reading about this, even in our health, of the scope of a general practitioner, a doctor. Um, Things like exercise and diet are not in their scope of practice. They can't talk about it. They can't really
Right.
reference it unless they
Right.
could get sued for malpractice, and their insurance will go away and they can't practice, which is crazy. So so I think it's just zooming out 30,000 feet. And so that's what I'm seeing. But what I do is I zoom out 30,000 feet and I go, okay, what's going on? And we have dogs who have this. They've just a lot of times, to be completely honest, the majority of my clients, they haven't been told no ever. So they
Yeah.
get this habitual barking or jumping or pulling, and they've just never been told no. And it's like this, once this light bulb goes up and you start disrupting things and breaking things down and you start teaching, is 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 where things start to get really better really fast. So that's my tip. Currently, that's what we're seeing a lot of is dog goes into vet, stressed and dangerous at the vet or scary to the vet. They go to a behaviorist. Behaviorist sits down in a corner, looks at a video, watches the dog, writes a script. And to be fair, and I'd love your take on this, I think that that's what a behaviorist is supposed to do. They're supposed to diagnose. I don't know how much education they have on dog training or handling. What are your, what's your, I mean, what's your background on that, on that in general?
So the people who are, I think who you're talking about specifically are veterinary behaviorists. They're vet behaviorists. Um, and they are primarily vets who then have additional training with behavior.
Ah,
But because they are vets at the core, they will look at the problem in front of them from a medical framework because they're vets and that's how
hmm,
they're trained. You are going to problem solve according to the training that you have, right? And so if they're going to come at this from a medical framework, then it's not surprising medication is going to come into it. It's not. Um, they're trained as vets, they're not trained as trainers. There's a
hmm,
difference. And so when they come at it from a medical framework, they're going to prescribe medication. Is what I've seen. I continuously see people coming in saying they went to a vet behaviorist and then they're coming in with like literally cocktails
yeah,
of medications. My issue, and here's this one thing that I don't think anyone's talked about, and it kind of bugs me. And again, I see this in some of the comments when just all over Facebook and Instagram when we're discussing this thing about medication and over medication of dogs. You'll always get somebody in the comments saying, well, but a lot of dogs might actually have like so they're basically the anti, we can train this, right? We can train this away. I don't think you could train that. It's probably a lot of dogs have an actual medical problem, and they need to have the medication. And why would you deny them of that? So here's the thing, and we're talking about SSRIs, right? SSRIs, SNRIs, SARIs, they're all different categories of medications that by and large tinker with the amount of serotonin in your brain. There are some people who just assume that, okay, well, there's an issue with serotonin levels in the brain, so we're going to rectify that with the medication. Right there is a problem. We are assuming off the get-go that that dog or that person has a serotonin deficit. I'm assuming that that dog has a serotonin deficit, and I'm going to try to rectify that with a medication that's going to elevate the levels of serotonin. We can't make that assumption, can we? Because there's no way of actually testing the levels of serotonin in your brain. Right. So if you go, let's just say I said, oh, you come to me and you've got fatigue. You say, oh, Steph, I'm so tired all the time. I got headaches, blah, blah, blah. And I might say, well, Tom, maybe you just don't have enough vitamin D. You should probably take more vitamin D, right? Because fatigue, all these types of things, the symptoms you're telling me are very much in line with vitamin D deficit. So here's a bottle of vitamin D drops. You should take that. Don't you think it would be better if we took a blood sample and actually know what your levels of
Yep.
vitamin D are? Are you, in fact, in a deficiency state? If you are, then let's prescribe that so we can rectify that. If you are not deficient in that, then the problem is probably something else, and we should go on that avenue. But the diagnostics are really important. There's no diagnosis when it comes to this. And you might say, well, then why don't we just take, a sample and why can't we just like measure the levels of serotonin before we put them on medication? There's no way right now,
Yep.
clinically, to actually measure the levels of brain serotonin. It's actually, for all intents and purposes, impossible. For a long time, there wasn't any way of doing that. You'd actually have to euthanize an animal. So, like all the studies looking at serotonin were actually harvested brains of like mice that were euthanized. So you can get that kind of data. Obviously, you can't do that with people
Yep.
or pet dogs. Um, and I think more recently, there's other ways of like putting in a probe into your brain and pulling out the fluid and then measuring the serotonin. Obviously, we're not going to do that. And I think most recently, there's probably some sort of fancy, PET scan, brain scan that you could do. But then again, you need some radioactive tracers, and then you're going to need general anesthesia. And that's just not done in clinical practice. So it's a long-winded way of saying we are, I think, for people who think, well, we're just trying to fix a deficit. Well, you don't know if there's a deficit or not. You've never measured it. You've never measured it. We
Yep.
don't know, and we'll never know because there's no way of knowing right now, practically, clinically. Nobody's doing this. I would actually worry that actually giving them medication could actually mess up their brain chemistry because you don't know what you were starting with to begin
Mm.
with, right? And
Yeah.
if you're seeing any type of effect at all, it's very well the fact that you're just blunting the response because of a sedative effect. Now, I've heard some people say, oh, well, medication's not supposed to sedate. Well, the key word there is not supposed to. In practice, in reality, even if on the label it doesn't say that there's a sedative, just because something's not labeled to say it's not a sedative doesn't mean that it can't sedate, right? Trazodone, for example, that's a big one. Everybody know, like how
Yep.
many dogs have I seen on trazodone that look like zombies? Gabapentin is another one at low levels. It can have sedative effects at high levels. It can actually knock you out and make you go to sleep. Like you can actually use it as a sleep aid for some animals. So to say that there's no sedative effect, I don't think is it's just an outright lie because people say that all the time and pet owners hate the zombie-like sedative effect that these
Sure.
medications have. And you can't just take medications nilly-willy and think that there's not going to be any side effect
Yeah.
or that there
Y-
aren't going to be consequences of taking things like that, right? So all I'm saying is, are there times that maybe there's that 1% animal that truly has real nervous system dysregulation? Um, because they're genetically like that. They're born a nerve bag. They can't uh, deal with existing. And I've seen a dog like that, like literally can't exist. They're just a bag of
Yeah.
nerves like, standing in a quiet room. They can't handle that. There may be some, but those are very rare. For the most part, like 90% of people who come see you have come to you because somebody's misdiagnosed
Yes.
anxiety. When it's not anxiety, it's just a dog that's completely understimulated mentally and physically. Like I had a guy come to me and he said, "Oh, I think, the dog needs medication because he had a healer, it was a blue healer, and said, "Oh, she's very nervous and she has anxiety." And I said, "Well, what's the problem?" He says, "Well, she keeps running to the window and barks at everybody that comes across my house." And I'm like, "That's not anxiety.
Right.
It's an obedience and management issue, and the dog just doesn't know she shouldn't be doing that. And you need to exercise that dog and provide it stimulation because you've got a working dog,
Yeah.
right? It's not anxiety. And that's why when they come to you, you're going to see results when you take them off the medication and train them through it because it was never anxiety to begin with. It was gross understimulation.
Yeah. It's the same thing with people. Like if I mean, I talk about this all the time, but working out just changes everything. You got so much cooking up here and you're thinking about everything. And then all of a sudden you do a couple miles and do a couple push-ups and chin-ups and you're like, whew, you took all that craziness and just pushed it somewhere. And now you're level. It's the same thing with dogs. It's the same thing when we talk about that with that healer. Um, what when you said vet behaviorist, what's the alternative to a vet behaviorist? When you said the people who are diagnosing dogs predicated off of their symptoms that they're hearing or seeing, is there another type of behaviorist that would handle the dog, train the dog, put together a training routine before they suggest medication? Is there a
Well, only vet behaviorists can actually prescribe medication. So that
okay?
their own set of education as veterinary behaviors. Um, on the other hand, me, I have a PhD in behavior and welfare. So I'm not a vet and I can't prescribe medications. So they're just different categories. There's the DVM and then there's the PhD. So I would fall into the second category. So I'm not a vet, right? And I don't come at things from a medical framework because that's not
Right.
where my training was.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Let's get into some questions from some people.
Oh, we have
And then
questions?
I think so. We should see. I did I did on my story that you were coming on and I said, what questions do you have? So this is live right now. So it's gonna take me because some of them are gonna be like, what do I do if my dog poops on my head? I want to get something that I want to get something that will be up your alley that would be helpful for people. Um, let's see. Is hyperarousal something that can truly be combated through desensitization? So you can look at that from a training standpoint or even a behavioral standpoint or both. What's your thoughts on that?
For arousal.
Yeah, so I would say the context, judging by this
Yeah.
question, would be a dog that is probably overly stimulated, like, excited that everything's around and they're presenting anxiety because or they're presenting they're chirping and they're whining, they may be
Mm.
spinning. Like I think a lot of trainers will talk about, well, you got to desensitize this. Like, do you think that you can desensitize that healer, right, that you were talking
Yeah.
about?
Yeah.
Do you think you'd ever be able to desensitize the dog going, there's somebody out there and I want to go chase them? Like, what are your thoughts on that? I
Well, so
think
in
that's the
that
question.
context, there's somebody outside and I want to go bark at the window.
Hmm.
Uh, for me, that particular instance, I was saying that the animal is completely understimulated and needed a crap ton more exercise that it obviously wasn't getting as an outlet. So that's not desensitization. That's just literally getting like energy out. There's just too much energy um, in the dog. And then mentally working the dog as well, like doing stuff with the dog where it's got to use its brain and figure things out, whether that be maybe a hide it and find it game, sniffing things out, or doing some rapid fire obedience. I think the arousal part is really just way too much energy with no outlet. And then capping that on top by putting the cherry on top of that is to then just put a obedience on there to clearly indicate what is and is not allowed in the house. So, okay, we've taken the energy out now. Now also, you're also not allowed to go screaming through that window all the time because those are the rules in the house. And that's where the training comes in. So I think it's sort of multifaceted.
Yep. It's a balanced approach just on you got to have management and skill sets, but you also have to make sure like, hey, same thing with that healer I was talking about. I'm not going to
Mhm.
start telling this dog what they can and can't do when they're sitting there going, like, all
Yeah,
right, you need to go for a run and then let's talk, right? Like
exactly.
calm
Yeah.
down,
Yeah, no.
get this energy out. I got one more for you.
All
And
right.
this is more of a training question. When do you choose to use negative punishment versus negative reinforcement?
It depends on the situation. And I know that people are going to hate that response, but
Yep.
you have to give me the context. You have to give me the context. Like what exactly is
Yeah, I know.
going on? I think part of it too, honestly, is no, actually, I was going to say something, but no, I was going to say like how dangerous is the behavior it is that you're dealing with as well. Because
Yep.
sometimes you got to match what you're seeing with an equal amount of intensity, but I don't know what the situation is in this case.
Yeah. And I've been using like I've again being a dad and all the things and behavior and all that, I've been learning a lot about negative punishment.
Mhm.
Because that's really, I mean, obviously positive reinforcement is huge. Negative punishment has been really helpful for my 2 year old, where if he's doing something that we don't want him to do, or if he's, like, and a lot of it is just overtired and cranky
Yeah,
and being a 2 year old, but a
cranky.
lot of it is just removing him. Like if all the family's out and he's being, if he's like, spitting or even like we were at the pool, we were in Florida the other day and he was like at the pool and if he's and I'm telling him like don't run because it's slippery and I saw like two kids just donk,
Yeah,
and so there'd be times where he would just so excited that he'd go to get a drink his apple juice and then he'd run over to the pool and every time he would run I would get out of the pool and I'd take him I'd remove him and I'd put him over into the chair and he'd be like oh and he'd be upset
yeah.
and that would be like the negative punishment of removing him from the thing that he wanted to do because he
Hmm.
did something I didn't want. And so
Hmm.
anyway, that's just a little side note that as I'm raising a kid, like positive punishment is obviously really hard to obtain with a human,
Yeah,
unless you're, but again, it's usually predicated off of taking something away. I'm grabbing a baseball bat, I'm taking it away. It becomes negative punishment immediately once I
hmm.
remove it. Um, but anyway, so I've just been a lot of negative or even times where he's just cranky and saying things that he doesn't know what he's saying and he's mean and say like he tells our nanny all the time just to get a reaction. He'll say, "I don't love you," just to get
Right,
a reaction. He has no idea really what that means, and
right.
we'll remove him from any fun that he's having. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But anyway, listen, it's been a pleasure having you on. I appreciate you chatting with me. And if you want to tell people where they can find you and follow you and watch the things that you're doing
Yeah.
and things you have to say.
Thank you for having me again. It's always such a pleasure. Chats can be like a marathon because we have so much to talk about. So thanks for having me back. If anybody's interested in checking us out, it's at Black Kraken K9. Kraken is Kraken. There's no C in there. Black Kraken K9. We're on Facebook and on Instagram. I hear from Jamie. We're also on Threads. I don't even know what that is,
Mm.
but apparently we're on that thing. And we also have a website. I believe it's blackkrakenk9.com. If you're interested in checking us out, our latest litter and our journey, and as well as a new German Shepherd litter that we hope is going to be happening. We bred her a few weeks ago, and hopefully we'll make up for the lost litter that didn't take last year. And looking
Mm,
for really, really, really good, committed owners that want to work their dog. So,
heck yeah. Cool.
yeah.
Well, thank you
Thank you
so
so
much,
much, Mom. Hey, happy
Stephanie. I
Easter.
appreciate you. You too. Thank you. Thanks for hopping on. I'll put all the things you just said in the show notes too, so people can click on it and find your website and all that stuff. But yeah, it's a pleasure talking to you again, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you again.
All right.
All right,
Bye-bye.
bye.